The Senior Rehab Podcast is sponsored by Great Seminars and Books. If you need high-quality geriatric con ed that's worth your time and money, check out Great. Owned by the living legend Carol Lewis, Great offers courses and products created by recognized leaders in geriatrics. Learn the most effective techniques for diagnosing and treating your patients. Just go to seniorrehabproject.com/great and get $25 off by using the code SRP25. Hit me.
This is a Senior Rehab Podcast, the podcast for rehab clinicians that want to better serve older adults. And now your host, my grandson, Dusty Jones.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast. Thank you for your time. Today's guest is my doppelganger, William Boyd from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I say that because he has a shaved head or balding. I'm not sure which one, but he has a red beard as well, as I do. But he is a recent graduate from the physical therapy school up there in Pittsburgh, where they put French fries on everything. He is the host of the Two Nobodies Talking podcast and the Breaking Student Debt podcast. He is passionate about helping people create the lives they want to live. He is also an active member of the Senior Rehab Project Facebook group. Will, welcome to the show.
It is a pleasure to be on the Senior Rehab podcast, and definitely balding. So we'll just get it out there. It's okay. But yeah, it's so funny that you bring that up, that we're doppelgangers, because I forgot that Ryan Smith, who's been on your podcast before, came and stayed with me in Pittsburgh for a night, and he goes, "Yo, man, you look just like Dustin Jones." So you're not the only one to notice that.
Ryan, I've got a man crush on him. I probably shouldn't say that
He's
since
a great
we
guy.
slept in the same bed at CSM a couple years ago, but he's a good guy. Good guy.
I think we just found a new story for CSM After Dark with Karen Litzy next year. Yeah.
All right. So you are a recent graduate. So I wanted to talk about a little bit of that experience with PT school and the exam and all that fun stuff. And then also your podcasts, and in particular, the Breaking Student Debt podcast, because I've found that very interesting and just really impressed that you're tackling that issue with the audio medium. So let's start off with the exam. How was the exam, and what words of wisdom would you give yourself before you took the National Physical Therapy exam?
Man, the exam was long. I think anyone who's probably taken it before, it's definitely a marathon and a grind. And so I tried to approach it by taking practice exams essentially in the same type of setting I knew I would be in. So I kind of got a private room in our university's library, and would, if you take the PED exams, which I think are a part of the NPTE registration stuff, you can pay for it. They actually have the same timers and everything, and they time down the test. So I took those, and that really, really helped. But even that, I think, doesn't prepare for that kind of adrenaline, stress, and just the grind of the exam. And the interesting thing is I felt like I left only remembering the ones that I didn't know, and completely forgot about the 9 or 10 in between that I did know. So you just walk out feeling like, oh man, there were so many I didn't know. But, after all of that, every single one of us, I remember meeting with friends right after that. Obviously, we were just kind of chatting about the experience overall. And, we were all 100% convinced that we probably failed. And then you get your scores, and everyone passed that I know of that took it with us. So I guess the thing I would tell someone who's preparing for it, and what I would tell myself beforehand, is, trust that you've put in the work and the effort. And obviously you have to do the work and the effort first to feel that confident. But I wish I would have just kind of enjoyed the process more. It's really a time to show the knowledge that you've accumulated over this period of time, not a fearful, test or this anxiety producing thing. Really, it should just be a time to sort of share what you know. I guess that's what I would recommend.
Yeah. The enjoying the process, would you say that applies to PT school as well? Like in terms of, if we talk about your experience, did you feel like you were able to enjoy the process, or were you kind of bogged down with the tests and the practicals and making the grades?
Yeah, I think it can flow. There were definitely times where I felt bogged down, and I think it's just normal. You're in such an intensive environment. It's hard not to feel bogged down, but I would say there are definitely times where I did enjoy the process, and I think, a lot of reflecting, and it's hard for us as people going through, whether it's a PT program or another intense program. And I relate this a lot to exercise too, whether it's a prolonged plan of care, in that, we're really fortunate to be where we are, in that, not even a fraction of people who apply to PT school get in and get to be there and get to experience that, and experience that level of education. And it's hard to remember when you're so tied down with exams and projects and practicals and you name it. But really, it's a huge testament. And I think we all expect ourselves to pass, which, it's just, I think that's the type of person that gets to PT school. Mm-hmm. But I think it's definitely worth remembering that it's a really, really hard thing. And, to be proud of yourself along the way that you're even there. And I wish I would have done that more, to remind myself to enjoy the process and just be grateful for where I was at the time. Mm. But I absolutely agree that it's it ebbs and flows. But it's important, if you can remember to enjoy the process.
It's funny because, when I went to PT school straight out of undergrad, and like, I'm really good at taking tests, but in terms of applying that knowledge to, what's in front of me or the real, world situation, I can definitely struggle. And I remember finishing PT school and thinking about, I want to learn just for the sake of learning, and to be able to, better serve my patients, and to not let the grade be the primary motivator. And I distinctly remember telling myself that. And it's just so interesting that now, I'd still take tests. Like, I work for a home health agency where we have to take these kind of review exams, for like continuing education, and to, be up with OSHA guidelines and all this stuff. And it's funny, even in that stuff, even knowing what I know now, I still, I don't enjoy the process. Like, I just bust through it, and, I'll just kind of, because you can take the tests, the quizzes, for unlimited number of times. Sometimes, I just won't even look at the content, and I'll just try and, get the passing grade on the exam, and then just, get on with life. And my employer is probably going to hear that, which, I'm going to go ahead and apologize. But it's interesting just to have that PT school experience, but still have that same struggle, knowing, even though I know better.
Well, I think that's really important too, because you have to remember to prioritize things in life. And I try to current students that, sacrificing 100% on a test for an 85 or whatever is passing, but enjoying your life, enjoying yourself, has so much more value down the road. And building relationships with people, taking time to meet people during maybe that 6th hour of studying, that you probably, I know people want to tell you need that, but really, you also have to enjoy what you're doing in life, because life is so short. I mean, really, life is long, but really, as it goes, it's short, and for everyone it's different. But really, I try to recommend like self-awareness, self-reflection. What's a priority to you? What's important to you? And don't let a test score ever define who you think you are. It's one day, it's one moment, it's one hour, 2 hour period, in time, that doesn't reflect who you are as a person. And I hear this a lot from students, and I was there too, that I would think a test score defined who I was. And I just want to say that it doesn't, that you are a special person. You have so much to offer beyond a certain number on a piece of paper.
Will, can I call you whenever I get down in the dumps or stressed out?
Man. Absolutely.
Man, that was beautiful, man.
We need to call each other.
All right.
It's true. It's hard to remember. It's hard to remember in the moment, but it is so important because you have so much to offer. Every single one of us has so much to offer.
Well, it definitely sounds like you had quite the 3-year span in PT school in terms of, learning a lot about our profession, but yourself as well. I'm curious, if you could go back and talk to the Will Boyd 3 years ago, what would you tell him? What advice would you give him?
Man, that's a really tough question. Honestly, I think I'd have to tell myself to be prepared to be surprised. And by that, I mean, I try to be transparent about this, but I don't think that PT, formal education, lived up to what I thought our profession would be. And by that, I mean, I just really thought there was going to be, this concrete evidence for everything that we do, and it's going to solidify all of my beliefs about physical, health and manual therapy and all these things that I went into with. And, that just ended up not being the case. And that's not to say that there aren't those things. I just don't think it was, as solid as I thought it might be. But that doesn't mean that there's not a world of opportunity to still find your niche within this wonderful profession that we call physical therapy. And I think that applies to anyone in any field in life, and that just because something doesn't meet your expectations doesn't mean there still can't be an incredible silver lining in there, that you can find a way to maximize your skills and your interests and your passion and your talent and pivot those in a way that allows you to be the most successful you. And so I think if I could go back and talk to myself, I would say just continue to be minded and don't let expectations dictate how you feel about yourself and how you view your career and how it could go.
So how are you applying that advice right now? And especially when you mentioned that the opportunities are limitless in our field, that we have the ability to pivot in so many different directions, that you can, contribute to the greater good, whether you're working the 9 to 5 in the clinic or in another, capacity. So now that you're out of school, kind of going through, kind of filling out where you're going to go after this, what's kind of going through your head in terms of how you're making these decisions?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. So I've been I graduated in December and I passed the boards. I found out I passed the boards mid-February. And so there's been a good month and a half of really doing a lot of deep self-reflection and trying to figure out what I want. And it's hard because on the outside, the expectation should be pretty clear. Get a job, start making money, right? And be happy with that and start paying down your loans, which are all realities. I guess I've just been really self-reflective and spent a lot of time thinking about what do I want out of my life, because I really do feel like, as far as I know, we get one shot, and you might as well do the things that you love, because why not? The last thing, I think a lot about Jeff Moore, who's been such an inspiration from afar to me and to a lot of other people. And he always talks about the rocking chair, that can you look back on your, when you're facing your last days and you're sitting in the rocking chair, can you look back and say, I'm proud of what I did and I didn't regret anything. And so I had to be honest with myself in that I really enjoy the creative outlet that certain mediums allow for. And so that's part of the reason behind starting a podcast, as well as I have an interest in doing marketing and website design, as well as I think so much about someone like Mike Eisenhart and you, Dustin, who are doing some out of the box things that are, I think, allowing us to see the potential within our profession. I think for so long it's been your one role is you're a clinician, and then potentially maybe you can go into education, or you could work up into a more director administrator role within whatever clinic system you were in. But I think now looking around, it's like, well, what else can we do? And really being a follower of Mike Eisenhart and what he's doing has really got me thinking more about community health and he calls it population health, being able to tackle these issues. And something that I've been thinking a lot about is, do I want to work full time as a clinician and maybe have to sacrifice the creative side that I have?
Mm-hmm.
Or would I be willing to go part-time being a clinician and find other alternatives to meet these internal needs that I have? And I'll be honest, it's tough. I don't know if I can. I'm faced with a lot of debt. I'm faced with student loan bills coming quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what's going through my head. I wish it was an easy process, but I'm kind of grateful that it's not, and it's really making me have to reflect on who I am and what I want, which is a difficult process, but one that I think ultimately is going to help me. So I don't know if that answers the question, because there's no final conclusion to that, but that's where I'm at right now.
I think it is a good answer, and it's helpful because, I mean, I hope there are students listening to this that are hearing you ask yourself those questions. Like, what do I actually want? What do I want my life to look like? And use that kind of concept of reverse engineering and thinking about, on that rocking chair when you're, in your mid to late 80s, and, you got your grandkids and maybe great grandkids all around, and just thinking about what your life, looks like at that point, and just kind of taking the steps back to how can you get to that point where you're happy and content and proud, of what you've done with this short bit of time on earth. And I feel like, the rocking chair example, for me, that's been almost every day with home health.
Yeah.
Just being beside people that, probably don't have too much longer on this earth. And that does make you think and question how, you are spending your time. But I think I appreciate you being vulnerable, though, and just, being open about those things, because, there's probably a lot of traditional kind of, traditional clinicians, I guess that's probably a terrible term, but, it is expected. You just get the full-time job and you bust your butt and, don't ask questions. You just, get to the grind, because that's what has been done for so long. But to know that you don't have to do that, but you can still have a massive impact, on society and have, definitely a sense of purpose, without, just giving away, 60 hours of your week to your job.
Yeah. I mean, I really think that you're paving the way, Dustin, for a lot of us younger clinicians, in that I don't usually talk about it that often, because I think there's maybe a negative connotation or stigma that, like, I don't want to treat 60 to 80 patients in a week. And, I think I've been fairly open on my Breaking Student Debt podcast, and sometimes with the nobodies, that, I struggle with anxiety, and it's something I've dealt with over the last decade or so. And I find myself after 40, 50, 60 patients in a week, like, it becomes very emotionally draining for me. Not something that I go home and I hide my head under a pillow, but, I feel drained. I try to be very present with people. And so it's something that I've had to think about, is it something I really want to do 40, 50 hours a week? Or is this something maybe that I still have a lot of value to bring? I just can only bring it so much at a time. And I feel afraid to say that, because I'm nervous that older clinicians will look at me as if I'm not cut out for this, or I'm not adequate. When really, I think it just comes down to self-reflection and knowing myself, and knowing that I have value to bring, I think, in multiple areas and multiple facets. Mm-hmm. And I think traditionally it's been, who cares? Go treat. Mm-hmm. Go treat patients. But I look at someone like Mike Eisenhart, who's really an inspiration to me, in that, there are different avenues we can go affect the world. And I kind of just want treating patients to be one aspect of that. And so, yeah, it's definitely something I'm still trying to work through. I wish I had a better answer, but the one thing that's been refreshing is I hear from a lot of young clinicians, and they feel the same way. I think there are a lot of people out there who want to have a different impact on the world, that's not just treating 40, 50 hours a week, but maybe treating 30 hours a week and having 10 hours to be creative and reach out to people and do different things. And so, if you're out there and you're listening and you're there, I forgot the original question, to be honest. So I hope we covered it.
No, you did. Yeah, and you mentioned the volume, and just how that can be emotionally draining. And I feel like that's very important for that whole self-reflection piece that you talked about. Because, for example, my father-in-law is a legendary, physical therapist in my hometown of Huntington, West Virginia, Mark Taylor. He's going to be on the podcast at some point. But the guy will treat, like, a slow day for him is like 20 patients a day. But it's nothing. And everyone loves him, and he gets, really good outcomes. And he's just a boss. I mean, just amazing. And he does well with that. Me, on the other hand, I can't think of anything worse that I would want to do. And I think there is a lot of individuality in that environment, and your ability to handle the pace and the ability to make decisions quickly, and to have kind of the capacity, to serve your patients well. And, my father-in-law definitely, seems to have that. But to be okay with saying, you know what, that's not for me. I may, go the slower route or work less time, to have the energy, to devote to other areas. And this is something, I'm dealing with this right now. And it makes me think of a post that Jamie Lowy wrote. He's a home health PT. He's been on the podcast. I feel like I mentioned him every other episode. Awesome guy. But he wrote this post called "The Bust of Mediocriville," and just calls out mediocrity in our profession, and just talks about how, like, the productivity standards and just all, just the current state of rehab really promotes just getting documentation done quickly and being able to bill, for your services and get, a decent amount of reimbursement, and how that doesn't necessarily equate to better care. And it can slowly eat away at clinicians' souls. And, before you know it, you're on the bus to Mediocriville. You're becoming a mediocre clinician and providing substandard care. And I feel that pressure for sure. And it sucks my soul.
Yeah. How are you handling it now, in the position you're at now?
Well, it's difficult. I mean, for listeners, Will and I were talking about, life in general before we hit record, but I think it's been an ever increasing challenge for me, because I have this, the senior rehab project. I have this side gig, hustle, whatever you want to call it, that, like, I love, and I find it very fulfilling. And I really feel I have a lot of purpose behind it, and feel I could make it better and grow it and make it more impactful if I had the time and the energy to do that. And so it's a struggle to devote to SRP what I feel it deserves, but then also devote what my job deserves. And I'm at a point where I almost feel like I'm doing both in a kind of half-assed way. And that can be tough, going to bed at night thinking about, that patient interaction that I had where I probably should have stayed 5 more minutes, but I was, worried about, the interview that I had to do with someone that I scheduled, things like that it's like, man, it's almost like I have these competing endeavors, but they're very complementary, but it's difficult to give them both what they deserve, I feel. So something's got to give. I'm just not sure which one is going to give.
Well, it's good to hear the people out there who are feeling the same way. And maybe it's not with a podcast or a project, but maybe it's family or other interests.
Yeah, and that's
refreshing to hear someone who's doing it.
That's a good point. So let's transition into something that I think is very pertinent to this conversation, and that is your Breaking Student Debt podcast, talking about personal finance and just kind of documenting your journey. I guess the first question, if we're going to shift gears, why start a podcast about student debt and personal finance? What was your motivation behind that?
There were a couple. One is very selfish in that I was really hoping that I could meet people who had gotten out of debt, whether that was student loan debt, credit card debt. It didn't matter. Just people who had figured out ways to really reduce this thing called debt. And for me, it was sort of a selfish plea to meet these people and try to learn from them how they'd done it. So I call it like a self hack. I was trying to kind of hack my way out of debt. But then the other reality is I was really curious. I feel like education is incredibly overpriced. I can't say it's overvalued, but I really think it's overpriced, especially when you think about how it relates to potential income earnings down the road. And so it's something that I kind of struggled with, and I really wanted to know more about in terms of policy and where we're going. Because in my mind, I just kept thinking, we're so outpacing inflation in terms of tuition costs rising, that where do we go from here? Is it soon going to be 200 grand for an education, 300 grand, 400 grand? Because we're not seeing salaries rise at the same rate. Yeah. And so I was really curious, like what, are we setting up our future students for, really no chance at financial freedom down the road? And, it's one of the major questions I get asked by people who are considering PT school is it worth the cost? And so it's kind of been a journey into trying to answer that question. And the hard thing is there's no real answer. But I really wanted to find out a little bit more about how we're moving as a society when we think about debt. Because one thing that really frustrates me, and I think about my friends who have had to make decisions to not work abroad for a year, to not study abroad, to not go take a chance on a internship that didn't pay, but it was in something that they loved, and they just couldn't justify it because of cost. And I think about how many creative and wonderful people and wonderful minds we're losing to feeling constrained in a job that they take because they have to make money. And I totally understand that we have to make money. I just think that if we can come up with a way that allows for people to feel less burdened by that, maybe there's someone right now sitting at an office job who could create the next, CRISPR, or the next, who could be the next Elon Musk if they only had a little bit of push to take the chance on what they're passionate about. And I really feel like student debt and debt in general is such a shackle and restriction, puts a restriction on us from really chasing our dreams at times. And so for me, that was why I was interested in it. I wanted to hear from people, figure out how to get rid of it so that hopefully we can share that message and help people feel like they're more in control of their finances and ultimately take risks and become more creative, because I think we really need that in society right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. What have you changed since starting this podcast in terms of your habits, behaviors, or financial decisions? You don't have to be too personal here, but share whatever you want.
So I've reduced my Chipotle intake for number one, which has been
terrible decision, Will.
It's killing me. I know, you're telling me. I'm fiending right now. I would love Chipotle. No, I would say the greatest thing is it's led to us meeting Joe Rinke of FitBucks. And if anyone doesn't know about that, I would highly suggest they work a lot with the PT community. And I've gotten involved with their team in terms of working with one of their coaches who has helped me sort of configure help me plan out how I'm going to consolidate my loans and things like that. And so I would say from the day-to-day stuff, it's just been in my mind more about making smarter choices. So do I need, do I need that extra box of cookies at the grocery store? Like, no, I don't, neither does my stomach. But it's been in my mind. I've been more conscious. I'm trying to live by the things that people are helping to teach me.
So have you come across many of the financial independence, early retirement folk in your journey with podcasting?
Yes, I have. In fact, I'm pretty sure every Facebook ad that has ever come across my Facebook in the last 3 months is just those people. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. It's
obnoxious.
They make it look so easy,
Oh, So
I would love
it's
for one of
true.
those ads to be a guy just like drinking coffee in his modest apartment, like really just like, yeah, it's not bad. I'm happy
It's
I made
not
this
that
decision
bad.
instead of like instead of the 23-year-old on the beach, just like my life is so amazing now that I know online marketing. I'd rather it be
Right.
just this like, normal guy. Like, yeah, I can pay my bills from what I do. This is great. It would be refreshing.
And if listeners aren't familiar with those ads, it's typically a 27 to 28-year-old who claims that they have made well over six figures every month for the past 3 years, based on their internet business that they started in their grandmother's basement, and now
Yeah.
they live in a mansion in California, and it's typically a video that is similar to something you'd see on MTV Cribs. Yeah, it's
That's
it's
so
ridiculous.
true.
So that I
Oh, and also you have to buy their product of how they did that. So you can,
exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, I love it. The internet. It's a great place. That whole community, and I guess there's different ends of that community as well. So you got kind of that extreme end. Then you have other people, that are producing really good content and very actionable, and they're impacting people's lives in a tremendous manner. And I know for me, I mean, it was an absolute game changer for me to dive into the personal finance space in terms of the content. And I know two people that have, influenced me beyond measure have been Joshua Sheets with Radical Personal Finance. It's
yeah.
it's an amazing podcast. He's the big reason why I started my podcast, honestly. And then Mr. Money Mustache is the
Yeah.
other one. And that's something that, especially the mustachian way, and I don't know how to succinctly describe it, but I don't know, would you be confident in explaining mustachianism?
I don't think I would be.
All right, I'm gonna give it a shot.
I think that's something better. Yeah, please do.
I'm gonna give it a shot and butcher it. So Mr. Money Mustache, he I think retired around the age of 30, but him and his wife had two high incomes, and they decided to save as much money as possible. And, they invested it in different ways, but their plan was to build up a portfolio where they could live off the interest that money would make. And I think for them, it was a lot of index funds, and they did some rental properties and whatnot, but that's kind of beyond the scope of this conversation. But he started blogging about it, and the guy is ruthless with his expenses, and just talking. He really speaks to people like you and I, Will, and the listeners, the people that, for the most part, we make good money in terms of income. Like we're not a super high income earning profession, but we can definitely support ourselves. And if we combine that with the concept of minimizing your expenses, even though that may not be for everyone, especially to the point that he preaches, but it's a very powerful combination in the sense of being able to live on say 20% of your income, and then to have so much left over that you could do whatever with it. For some, like for me, it was paying off student debt. For others, it could be a business on the side, or whatever it may be. But there's people doing things in a very unconventional manner that I feel like have a big impact for people in our shoes. That we can make a decent amount of money, even though we do have this tremendous amount of debt hanging over our head. I don't know. Do you think that accurately portrayed Mr. Money Mustache?
I think so. Yeah, I think you did a really great job. I think it's and you make some really great points in that I think that was a great explanation. I think we have so much potential. We have so much potential for income earning. We just might have to be more, whether that's conservative with our spending or be more aggressive with how we invest in certain things. And so, I think that's awesome. I think Mr. Money Mustache would be incredibly pleased.
What do you use to have a clear picture of your financial situation? Is there any software or kind of process that you use and would potentially recommend?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And this is something that I've tried to ask most of my guests about: how do you actually track your own money? Because, um, I think if you were born, let's say post 1985 or so, you probably only use the internet to track your finances.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, I grew up with my mom telling me I need to know how to balance a checkbook, and I need to know how to keep it all in a handwritten spreadsheet, essentially, of my bills. And uh, I feel really grateful that, my Wells Fargo account kind of does that for me, which is awesome, because I would definitely forget about certain bills at times. But no, I really use that. There's some really cool tools within, I think, most people's banking online profiles, and that you can do like things you want to save for and track whether you're doing well or not doing well. And full disclosure, I started this podcast too because I was horrible with personal finance.
Mm-hmm.
Not in like spending credit card money I didn't have, but I just wasn't really tracking it very well.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I haven't used too much software other than using sort of my own Wells Fargo personal profile. And there are things you can do within that. But what I have done is tried to really be better at just weekly keeping track of where is my money going. And I'll be honest, I'm still pretty bad at it, but I'm hoping to get better, and I'm trying to focus on it more and more every week. I think a big part of it is recognizing your weakness. And I know that's one of mine. I hated watching money be a big part of my parents' life growing up in terms of decisions and stress. And I kind of lived by a philosophy for a long time that I just wouldn't let that be a priority for me in terms of dictating stress and happiness in life. But now it's a reality, and it always has been, but I've just been forced to make it a reality. And it's a unique journey to go through to, really have to take responsibility for myself and my finances.
Yeah. And I do want to bring up that point. You talked earlier about, being reflective and knowing yourself, and especially, to any students or new grads that are listening, if you find yourself in a position to where, you are pretty clear that you may want to go down a more non-traditional route in our field. You may not want to take the full-time, outpatient job that, is offered to you, that you may want to do something part-time or PRN, or you just kind of feel your options out. It's very hard to do that if you do not have the personal finance side of things down, unless you got your parents paying your bills. But at some point, you'll probably get in trouble if you don't have a clear understanding of your situation, and let that inform, the decisions that you make. So if you do question your personal finance situation, I highly recommend you listen to Will's podcast, the Breaking Student Debt podcast. And there will definitely be a link in the show notes for that and other podcasts as well. So can I ask you, Will, some quick questions, but your answers do not have to be quick by any means. What has been some of the most helpful online education that you've received? So you can make this as broad or narrow as you want, but I'm thinking more along the lines of either an online course or a specific blog or podcast or anything that's kind of been really helpful for you.
Yeah, there are a few. I would say first starting out in the PT world, number one was PT on Ice, the podcast that Jeff Moore puts out every week, has absolutely changed my view on the profession, and it's just empowering every time he talks. That guy just breathes fire of passion.
Yes.
He's amazing. If anyone's out there and you're a student and you're hearing this, or you're even a new PT, shoot, anyone, and you're feeling lost in the profession, I highly recommend checking that podcast out. And it's usually the episodes are 10 to 20 minutes long. He's just a special guy. I'm really grateful he's in our field. So that, and then I took Greg Todd's Smart Success course, which was really powerful. It helped teach me a lot about how to view life through the lens of a business owner if you want to be a physical therapist. And so I wasn't sure. I'm still not sure if I want to be a business owner in the physical therapy world, but it really helped me start to see things differently in terms of what it would take to essentially run a business. So I was really grateful for that. And then I think overall, things that have really helped me are Tim Ferriss's podcast. It's just something I check out. Any new episode, he just talks with great people who are successful. I think one thing that we forget in terms of being successful is just studying success, and people have been successful. And then from the personal finance side at this point, it's been a lot of different stuff. I really have gotten into Melanie Lockhart's stuff. It's called DearDebt.com. And she tells people stories of their experiences with debt, the emotional side of debt, and how people have conquered their debt. And so definitely one worth checking out too.
What was that? DearDebt.com?
DearDebt.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I'll put a link to all those different shows that you mentioned in the show notes for sure.
Oh man, I would have kept it. I wouldn't have said so many. That's gonna be a lot of extra work.
No, it's all good, man. It's all, yeah. You understand that as the podcaster, don't you? All those hyperlinks I have to insert now. Gosh.
I'll send them over to you.
I'm kidding. Who is someone in our profession that people need to know more about? We know the Jeff Moores, we know the Mike Eisenharts.
Yeah.
Who is someone that we need to know more about?
That is a really, really tough question. Man, I would say someone who's been really impactful to us was his name's Joe Tata. If anyone's heard of him, he just wrote a book about chronic pain, and I think he's got a really wonderful message that's getting out there. And I would say Tracy Shear too. I would say Tracy, I think a lot of people probably know Tracy, but if you don't, she's phenomenal. I don't know her in person yet, but I've followed her content for a long time. And I think she's doing so many empowering things, with her pelvic guru, content. I highly recommend if you have any interest in that or, just leadership empowerment. I really, really like what Tracy's doing.
Okay. Link to their websites as well will be in the show notes. So last question here. Let's say we're at CSM. You are on stage. All right. You have every geriatric rehab clinician in the room and you have their attention. Will Boyd, what would you want them to know?
Honestly, I guess I feel maybe like it's not my place to say it as a student, but I think I'd really just say, empower your patients. I don't think age matters when it comes to what we're capable of. Maybe deadlifting 700 pounds is harder at 80 than it is at 25, but does it really matter? I don't really think so. I think just being able to live a healthy life, let those people know that there's still so much to live for and that they're important. Maybe they're at the tail end of life, but there's so much to learn from them. I think, one of the most empowering things is reading about what people wish they could do again when they're kind of on their deathbed or towards the end of life. And there's so much knowledge and power in listening to someone who's lived a full life. And so be present, empower them, and let them know that you can age really doesn't matter. I truly believe it's a mentality. I know it's a cliche, but I truly believe that. And I feel like, I would say give them a hug too, or a high five. There's been some interesting studies that have come out that, people as they age, I can't remember the study and I can't remember the age, so I feel bad saying this, but I think it was something like over 70 or over 80 years old. A huge percentage of people go an entire day without being touched. And that means just physical contact, a pat on the shoulder, a high five, a hug. You never know how far that can go with someone, and just completely change their day or their week. And so that was a lot, but I guess a hugging, an empowering hug, an empowering hug.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. Tied it together. Nice.
Boom. That is a good
That's
point.
what I would say.
And if you think about it, like I think about my time in like a skilled nursing facility and even home health for that matter, is some of these patients, especially the ones that are very dependent on mobility and transfers and, bathing and toileting, all that stuff. Like they need someone to physically help. And I just think of, how many times are they touched in just a regular, human interaction that is apart from someone doing something for them? Like every time they roll in bed, they're being pushed, wiping them down, doing a transfer, whatever. It's always kind of this, it's almost like a task or a job rather than just that kind of human to human connection or interaction that can be powerful, especially as isolated as some of those arenas can be. So I definitely think that is encouraging, and I need to hear that too, especially when I just kind of rush in and rush out of my patients' homes. So thank you, Will, for sharing that.
No, I mean, I think we all feel it in life. It's a hug, high five. It's something really simple, but there's a reason why touch is so powerful, and we crave it as infants and the rest of our lives. I mean, it has I don't think much replaces a human. So I think I wish we would get taught more about it. I think it's really powerful.
So with that being said, expect an awkward hug from me whenever we meet face to face.
Absolutely. It's like you're going to be in a mirror, though.
Yeah, that's true. Will Boyd, folks, he is at willboydpt.com. The Two Nobodies Talking podcast can be found at 2TWOKNOWBODIES.com. And then he also has the Breaking Student Debt podcast. All those links will be in the show notes. So be sure to check out the show notes for those links and all the things that Will mentioned throughout our conversation. And Will, just thank you for giving me your time and just being vulnerable and open as you always are, and just sharing your perspective. And I know you're such a humble dude that you don't think you're going to bring much to the conversation, but I know myself included, there's lots of people that are listening to this that will gain from your perspective, even though you may feel like you're fumbling along through school and your career. We're all right there with you, man. And it's helpful to hear just people kind of go through that journey. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dustin. I'm completely humbled to be on the podcast, and I absolutely love what the Senior Rehab Project is all about.
Hit me. Thank you for listening to the Senior Rehab Podcast. If you enjoy this content, I highly encourage you to go to seniorrehabproject.com, where you can find more helpful episodes, lots of free resources, and to see how you can become a game changer and influence the direction of this movement. I appreciate you, and I'll talk with you soon. But in the meantime, do not forget to stay funky. The Senior Rehab Podcast is sponsored by Great Seminars and Books. If you need high-quality geriatric con ed that's worth your time and money, check out Great. Owned by the living legend Carol Lewis, Great offers courses and products created by recognized leaders in geriatrics. Learn the most effective techniques for diagnosing and treating your patients. Just go to seniorrehabproject.com/great and get $25 off by using the code SRP25. This podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Jaros Collective, a podcast network that's redefining old and equipping healthcare clinicians to better serve our aging population. Find out more at GEROScollective.com.